The dusty air of the town square hung thick as the auction bell rang, drawing men and women from every ranch and homestead for miles, each one curious to see who would stand on that wooden platform today. Among them was Clara, a young woman with fiery red hair tucked loosely under a bonnet and a heart that had known more ridicule than kindness, for she was fuller than the other women and carried herself with a quiet dignity that seemed to unsettle the shallow-hearted townsfolk. When she stepped up onto the auction block, whispers spread through the crowd like wildfire, men nudging each other with cruel grins, women covering their smirks with gloved hands, and the auctioneer struggling to keep his booming voice steady as laughter rippled among the onlookers. Too heavy for the plow, too big for the dance floor, one man jeered, earning chuckles from his friends, while another shouted, "Better build a bigger wagon for that one." Clara's face burned, but she kept her gaze forward, refusing to let tears fall in front of those who found joy in tearing her down. She had been brought here not by choice but by circumstance, left alone after her father's death and forced into the cruel arrangement of being sold to the highest bidder, her worth reduced to the shallow eyes of men who judged only what they could see. Yet in the sea of mocking voices, one pair of eyes remained steady, not with cruelty, but with something deeper, something fierce and protective. At the edge of the crowd stood a cowboy named James, tall and broad-shouldered, with a weathered hat pulled low and hands roughened by years of honest ranch work. He had seen enough of the world to know that beauty wasn't the sharpness of a jawline or the trimness of a waist, but the strength of spirit, the kindness in a smile, and the courage in a woman's heart. As the bids stalled and the laughter grew louder, James pushed forward, his boots kicking up dust with each determined step, until he stood before the platform. Silence fell for a moment as the crowd wondered what he would say, and then his voice, strong and steady, cut through the mockery. "You're all blind. She's just right for me." Gasps spread like wildfire, the jeers vanishing as quickly as they had come, and Clara looked down, her breath caught in her chest, hardly believing what she had heard. James tipped his hat, his eyes never leaving hers, and with a bid that silenced every other man in the square, he claimed her not as property, but as the woman he saw worth fighting for. The auctioneer slammed his gavel, and though the transaction was done, the real story was just beginning. James took her hand gently, leading her down from the platform as the crowd parted, some in shock, some in shame, and others too stunned to speak. Clara, who had been moments away from being humiliated beyond repair, found herself walking beside a man who had chosen her in front of everyone, not out of pity, not out of mockery, but out of something real she could see in his eyes. The town might forget that day in time, but Clara never would, for in the moment she had been made to feel small. One cowboy made her feel seen, valued, and worthy. And though the road ahead would not be easy, it would be theirs to walk together, hand in hand, against the world that once mocked her. So if you believe in stories of love that defy cruelty, in courage that rises when it matters most, then make sure you stay with us, because more tales like this one are waiting for you. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, so you never miss the next chapter of love, hope, and the kind of cowboy romance that heals the deepest wounds of the heart. Clara sat silently on the wagon seat as James guided the horses out of the noisy town, her hands trembling in her lap, her heart still echoing with the cruel laughter that had stung her only hours ago, yet softened now by the memory of his steady voice cutting through it, all with the words that still rang like a promise. "You're just right for me." For a long while neither spoke, the creak of the wagon wheels and the rhythm of hooves filling the silence, until at last Clara dared to glance sideways, catching the profile of the man who had changed everything with a single sentence. James was quiet, his jaw set firm, but his eyes, when they turned to hers, carried no pity, only a strength and certainty she had never known. "Don't carry their words with you," he said softly. "They ain't worth the weight." Tears welled in Clara's eyes, not of shame now but of release, for no one had ever defended her like that. No one had ever seen beyond what the world mocked. As the sun dipped low, painting the sky with shades of gold and rose, they reached the wide pastures of his ranch, where fences stretched into the horizon, and the smell of fresh hay mingled with the evening breeze. James helped her down, his touch gentle, as though she were something precious, and introduced her to the quiet beauty of a place that would now be hers as much as his. Inside the modest ranch house, Clara felt the weight of years of loneliness lifting, replaced by the warmth of belonging. And when she looked around the simple wooden rooms, she did not see emptiness, she saw possibility, the beginning of a life built on respect and love instead of ridicule. That night, as the stars glittered above the open plains, Clara stood on the porch and whispered a prayer of gratitude, not for being chosen, but for being truly seen. James stepped beside her, slipping his hand into hers without a word, and in that silence was the loudest vow she had ever heard that whatever trials lay ahead, she would never face them alone. The girl who had been mocked on an auction block had found her place, not because the world changed, but because one man refused to let it define her worth. And so their story began, not with a grand ballroom or riches, but with dust, stars, and the steady heartbeat of love strong enough to silence every cruel voice. And if you believe in love that sees past the surface, in courage that dares to speak when others stay silent, then let the story remind you that true hearts always find each other. For more tales of strength, hope, and love that heals, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because the journey doesn't end here, it only begins when we walk together.